Dear diary full of shit. Just play along, me, myself, and I, and no one else. Yeah, I'm so legit. Just watching some YouTube videos. I'm watching this guy. It's called Uncle Tony's Garage. UTG, whatever. I forget what it looks like on the actual YouTube channel, but I subscribe to him. Don't watch him a lot, but every now and then I'll kind of binge on him, you know. He doesn't talk a lot about the technical aspect of cars. He's an older dude who tells stories. Some of them about cars, some of them about back in the day when he was on a pit crew, you know, for a top fuel dragster. Some of them, like the one that I've listened to just now, as well as I've listened to others that he has talked about this. The government mandated kill switch on all vehicles 2027 or newer, or 2028 or newer, or whatever, because they always put, you know, if you buy a brand new car, you know, today in May of 2026, for some reason it says it's manufactured. It'll say the years of 2027, but it was manufactured in 2026. It'll somewhere on there. It'll say that on the door stamp or somewhere. He just gave an example, and I went ahead and posted it in my Amen Drop the Mic 2, as well as Weak People Make Hard Times, because I'm putting my dent in the universe. YouTuber. And the example he gave, you know, is actually spot on. He needed to drive aggressive, you know. And if it shuts your car down, the first example he gave, it was something like, it was a friend of his who needed to get home, and it was winter, and the check engine light, you know, said pull the car over, so he did, because he didn't want to damage it. And then once he pulled the car over and put it in park or whatever, or dropped it below a certain speed, whatever, you know, it's like it died and it shut itself off and it wouldn't start, you know. So that could have been deadly. And I think he did. He started walking and somebody picked him up. But because it was one of those situations where it's like, well, shit, stuck between a rock and a hard place, you know. Take my chances and make progress, you know, towards a town, or stay here all night, you know, because cars don't offer much heat, you know. I mean, yes, you're out of the elements as far as moisture and wind, but the temperature quickly equalizes with that of outside. And your body heat isn't going to, I mean, it'll warm up the inside a little bit, plus you've got your clothes and whatnot. You can bring your arms, you know, inside your jacket and whatnot and kind of make this little cocoon, but, you know, this is not ideal. But yeah, this example he gave, and I guess they're doing it, the excuse is to keep impaired drivers off the road, but they use sensors, you know, so if you're driving erratic, you know, and I don't know if it's like you get so many, because sometimes you have to like avoid shit in the road, right? I remember he gave that example. So maybe it's like accumulative, and it uses good old, you know, AI, you know, to formulate, you know, a decision, you know, if we're avoiding a road obstacle or if you're impaired. But he said, you know, he's against drunk driving, you know, and he's actually thinks that even if it's a first offense, you know, it should be very harsh penalties. So I'm going to assume in his mind, you know, in most cases, you know, it's like the jail time is just dismissed. You have to take a bunch of classes, pay a bunch of fines, and do some community service, and you're on probation. But, you know, like with me, my first offense, you know, I didn't have to do any jail time. My probation, if I got all my classes done within 6 months and the community service, then I could end my community service after 6 months instead of 12, which means I wouldn't be obligated to do the daily call-ins for random UAs, you know, and all that shit. So that would save me, you know, money in that regard. The classes were more expensive. I think the classes fuck, I don't even remember. I think they were like $64 each or something like that. And I took like, 45 classes or something like that. The UAs were like $24, so they're cheaper, but that's still, whatever. And, when I first started out, I was taking like 3 UAs a month, and then it was down to 2, and, just sort of as time went on, it got less and less. But anyway, the DA, district attorney, you'd strike a deal with him, so it got reduced from a DUI to a DWAI, So these, in my opinion, these are all fair, at least for the first offense. So I would disagree with him on that. And not because I'm biased, because I got a DUI, but just because, that's just how I think. So I don't know what his idea of justice would be. It sounds like, even for a first offense, it's, a year in jail, and then all the classes and all that when you get out of jail, and then probation, so it sounds like he's kind of a hard ass for that. So, agree to disagree, but he did say that, he's all for keeping impaired drivers off the road. So if you want to have like a breathalyzer or something installed in every car, that's one thing. But, to have these sensors. And I suppose they thought of that, and there's probably, it's easier to circumnavigate, get around breathalyzer. See, if you have a breathalyzer because you got a DUI, that's information goes, to the courts and to your probation officer and shit like that. So you can't really cheat it, or it's at least hard to, and I would recommend against it. But, if it's like every car, I'm sure it would be a lot easier to cheat it, that would, to logistically enforce that, I think that would be, you'd have to like register it and, have it calibrated. I think I had to have mine calibrated every 3 months, and these kill switches are probably just something that are on your car that you don't have to think about. What happens if they malfunction? Because everything malfunctions, especially the more new and complex it is. So if something malfunctions on your kill switch system, is it going to derate your car and you got to go get that fixed for $10,000 or something? I don't know. Is there a way to delete it? How people, they say delete, but, to speak normal people terms and not computer people terms, unhook the fucking thing. Like when these diesel trucks came out with the after treatment system for the exhaust, you can't really get away with that in a commercial vehicle because you have to, play by commercial rules. But, Joe Blow owner might be able to get away with it if he lives in a county that doesn't have emissions requirements, which I am surprised that some counties don't. I live in a county that doesn't require emissions tests. It used to be, I think it was every 2 years, or maybe it was every 1 year. I think it was every 2 years for gasoline cars and every 1 year for diesels. But so I don't know. The logistics of that, but I know kill switches, it's like what could possibly go wrong? A lot. And he had mentioned, politicians who are incompetent at best, corrupt at worst, corrupt and evil at worst. And the manufacturers, and they're all oblivious to this, and or they don't care. Because the 12 fat cats at the Ford or whatever, they're part of that elite club that, it's like they don't care, nothing affects them. Gas prices don't affect them, grocery prices don't affect them. If their car derates and it won't start and they're now facing a $10,000 repair for, a malfunction that is due to government regulation or overcomplicated shit that has nothing to do with the vehicle running, You know, it doesn't affect them. But there's a lot of people out there, you know, where a $10,000, you know, bill could be the tipping point of losing their house, you know, in the next 3 months. So, interesting stuff. I'm not completely done with the video yet. I think there's probably like 5 to 10 minutes left, but anyway. I went out to lunch today with my former co-worker at not the gravel pit that I worked at last, but the one before that. Because he's moving to Oklahoma next week to just sort of try his hand, you know, in a different location and just, you know, travel and do things, you know. He's kind of a younger guy, so he's going to work down there and live with his uncle for a bit. And, you know, anyway, I'll skip the details on that. But I did find out about those companies that you can put out there, you know, put your information out there and companies can contact you. So that's a good place to start for me. And, you know, I'll kind of experiment and find out, you know, because then hopefully, you know, that'll, like, you can put your, well, number one, you got to put your resume, you know, upload that so they have that information. But it probably sounds like you can, like, what's your pay range, you know, and there's some preliminary questions that can just be asked, like, right out the gate, especially seeing as it's harder and harder to actually, like, talk to people on the phone and whatnot. And I've got, you know, my plan of attack, you know, for if I need to hit the streets, you know, and find a job. But so that's cool. And that, you know, that's like the first, you know, the first step done. Instead of you calling or filling out an application online or physically driving somewhere, it's like that's done because your shit's all available. And they decided to contact you and say, hey, we're interested in hiring you. You know, it doesn't mean, you know, come on down. It just means, you know, they've taken that first step. So that's cool. And that's really all I got to say, baby. Hey, yay. 13 minutes. I'll try and keep this short and sweet.